It's just before midnight in the city of Peru, Indiana. Local attorney Jim Grund has been working late at home. He's sound asleep when an intruder shoots him in the face, killing him. Later, police discover the gun had been stolen from Jim's son. But it's Jim Grund's wife, Susan, who is convicted of murder. Did she do it? She told police she wasn't even there. But what does she say now, after 18 years in prison? I want Susan Grund to answer some tough questions about her past. Will she expose a miscarriage of justice? Or did the jury get it right? I'm Candice DeLong. As an FBI agent, I worked on the front line for the world's most powerful law enforcement agency. I went undercover, I trailed terrorists, and I interviewed notorious killers. It's my job to understand the people who others cannot comprehend. Susan Grund was the person who found her husband's dead body. When police arrived, she pointed to a ransacked closet and proposed a theory. Jim had been shot after surprising a burglar in the house.
This is one of Peru's finest neighborhoods. Large pieces of land and prominent families here. This is not the kind of neighborhood where you'd expect to find a murder.
I've been to many crime scenes. You can always tell when something's not right. If it was a burglary, why was nothing taken? If Jim disturbed someone, why was he shot lying on the couch? A chain of evidence eventually leads investigators to Jim's wife. In March 1994, Susan Grund was found guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence? 60 years. Now, she lives here, Rockville Correctional Facility, Indiana. For me, this is going to be a fascinating interview. If Susan really is guilty, why would she agree to talk to me? Does she believe she can outsmart anyone who questions her case? Or will her answers ring true? Once we get talking, I'm sure I'll soon get a sense of how honest Susan is really being with me. You went from the society pages of Peru, Indiana, to prison lockdown. What would you like people to know about you?
I live with the title of the Black Widow. So I think when fallacy weaves into our life, that they forget that there is a woman behind the story, that everyone is not guilty just because the picture is painted that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What kind of dreams did you have as a little girl? I mean, no little girl dreams of spending most of her life in a prison. What were your dreams like?
I think I just wanted a family, have my own children, have my own life, and be happy.
At 17, Susan married for the first time. By 24, she'd been married 3 times, had a son, and was pregnant again. She was a poor girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Then she met a man from the swanky side of town, Jim Grund. Big name.
Yes.
Well-established family. He's an attorney. He'd been a prosecutor, correct?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. You're pregnant. You have a little boy. What do you think was going on? Why do you think he married you?
Perhaps when you take in a bird who has a broken wing and you nurse it back to health, even though when the bird is well and it can fly away, you've fallen in love with the bird because it sings so pretty. For whatever reason, you keep the bird.
Mm-hmm. You were Jim's
And then
bird.
perhaps that's what Jim did.
Okay. Now that's a sign of narcissism. For Susan, being worshipped by men is all important. Her new husband, Jim, did that for a while. But he wasn't the only man in the house. There was also Jim's teenage son, David. When David was 16 and you married his father, what was it like for David?
The typical teenager things. Breaking curfew, running around, getting drunk, just the typical things that teenagers do. And there was a lot of harshness between David and his father.
When did things start to go wrong?
Well, when David decided to take his father's place, I don't know how else to say. I guess when I stopped ceasing to be the bridge trying to gap the two of them, or bridge the gap, I don't even want to call it an affair. It wasn't really an affair.
Are you talking about an intimate relationship
Yes.
with your stepson?
Yes.
Okay, who was how old at the time that started?
Gosh, I would have to stop and think. He was in college, so he's 19, 20 years old.
At age 27, Susan Grund is queen of the social scene in Peru, Indiana. Her husband, Jim, is a high-profile attorney. They live in a beautiful home. But Susan claims she also has a lover, Jim's son, David. And so you end up at home alone with your college-age stepson,
Yes.
the son of your husband, in bed.
Yes.
When it was over, do you recall what you thought or felt?
Shame.
And how did David say how he felt?
He said, my father's wife in my father's house.
Meaning?
I suppose that that's the man he hates, and he did what the worst thing he could do to the man.
Am I to interpret your saying that as he said it like a conquest?
Yes,
And you felt shame?
absolutely.
Then why did it happen again?
Because I was afraid he would tell.
How long did this intimate relationship go on?
Maybe 2 years,
2 years.
but not frequent. You would think not like every weekend or anything like that.
It's an astounding claim, one that David Grund has always denied. For Susan, it's also the starting point for another quite incredible story. Did you admit to Jim that before he died that you had been seeing David?
Yes.
How did he take it?
He told me that he would handle it and we were to never speak of it again.
His exact words.
His exact words.
Did he seem upset?
No.
Anger, tears. I mean, that's probably one of the worst things a married person could hear, is that their spouse is having an intimate relationship that's gone on for 2 years with their child.
Absolutely.
And you're saying Jim just said, we'll never speak of this again? That strike you as odd?
Yeah. Very definite. No. Didn't want to know anything. No, didn't want to know any details, didn't want promise extracted, that it would never happen, nothing. He said he would handle it and we were never to speak on it again.
I find it very hard to believe that a man like Jim Grund would ignore such devastating news. The real story here is Susan's narcissism, which is a serious personality disorder. She believes she is irresistible to men. that her stepson finds her so attractive, he would kill his own father just to be with her. In my experience, stories like that only happen in Hollywood, not Peru, Indiana. The prosecutors at Susan Grund's murder trial made their case clear. Her marriage to Jim Grund was in trouble. The couple had been fighting and were seeing a counselor. Jim wanted a divorce. Susan would do anything to stop it. That was her motive.
How do you respond to these people that say he told them he was going to divorce you?
Liar.
Oh, okay. All right.
Find me one attorney that steps forward and says that he was filing the paperwork. Where's the paperwork? Who's the attorney? Who had, no, that's a lie.
Okay, all right. So Jim was not going to divorce you?
Never.
Never.
That's the first time I've seen a flash of anger from Susan. She flatly denies the prosecutor's case that fear of Jim leaving her was a motive. They had another allegation, that she was there when her husband died.
Let's go to that fateful night in August of 1992. What happened? Let's talk about that.
Well, it depends on how far back you want to go. But on that day, we had just returned from our family vacation. We had gone to Alaska. And we had another vacation. It was going to be a working vacation with the car dealership.
This is where Susan's story gets very strange.
We walk in, it's a big bed in front of the fireplace.
Given the chance to present a clear, concise version of events, she launches into a rambling story about
In
vacations,
addition to that, we had a third vacation coming up.
real estate ventures,
Because Jim and I were in the process of buying a condominium in Florida Keys.
who drove what car,
And now I've gone from a family car to his little sports car
and a trip to a campground.
because I had bought a camper trailer out of the fairground or the campgrounds for my mother to be right beside my sister.
She slows things down and brings in a flood of superfluous pieces of information. She's trying to confuse me. It's a smokescreen.
So I bought her own.
After 5 minutes of evasion, Susan finally starts to answer the original question. What happened on the night she found her husband murdered in her own home?
So when I walk in, the lights are not on, and Jim always leaves the lights on until I come home, whenever I'm not there. So when I flip on the lights and I'm calling out his name, because I don't understand why the lights aren't on, I don't hear anything. And when I look, he's on the couch and he's unresponsive. And I see a gun by his hand.
And then what did you do?
Well, I run to him to see why he's not responding. And there's no answer. It wasn't until I touch him. I don't know. I just knew I needed to get him help.
And then what did you do?
Something everybody says not to do when you're watching a TV show.
It's around midnight on a Sunday evening in Peru, Indiana. Susan Grund has just found her husband, Jim, shot to death in their home. What she does next is something that would raise the eyebrows of every detective in America.
It wasn't until I touch him. I don't know. I just knew I needed to get him help.
And then what did you do?
Something everybody says not to do when you're watching a TV show.
What's that?
I pick up the gun.
Why?
Because I didn't know what it was doing there in my house by my husband. I just hid the gun in my sewing basket.
Okay, wait. Before you went to make the emergency hospital call, you put the gun in your sewing
I
basket?
put the gun in my sewing basket.
So hiding it.
I hid it.
You hid it, okay. So you must have made the connection that the gun had something to do with your husband being unresponsive.
I didn't know, and I really didn't want it, at that point, I didn't want it to be a distraction on whatever was going on.
Okay.
So I thought, I don't know. Until I find out what's going on, the only person I knew who had a gun that we were very adverse to was David.
Okay. Did you think it was David's gun?
Yes, I did.
Remember, David is Jim's son, the guy Susan claims to have been sleeping with. None of this adds up. Why would a killer leave the murder weapon sitting by the victim? And if that killer really was David Grund, why would Susan hide the gun?
When did you first talk with David after his father was murdered?
I never did.
Did you want to?
No,
But you suspected him of killing your husband.
absolutely.
Some would think that they would want to confront the person that killed their husband.
I'm a little woman.
Well,
No,
all right. Did you tell the police your concerns?
no.
Why was that?
That's my husband's son.
Susan doesn't voice her suspicions to anyone. Instead, she gets her mom to hide the gun and makes a shocking confession to her sister, Darlene.
Darlene says you had told her, quote, "I killed Jim," close quote. Is that true or not?
That is true that she said that. It is not true that I told her that. Absolutely not.
Okay, she testified at your first trial.
She did.
Why would she do that?
I guess only she knows that.
You don't have a clue? Or it can't, I mean, you've had 18 years to think about why your sister would do that.
I think that the Grunds are pretty powerful in Peru. And to come up against them and what they decide is going to be happening in that town is a mighty feat. So buckling under is probably the safest thing for her to do.
If you had gotten rid of the gun, the weapon, the murder weapon, and never said anything to anyone, you would have gotten away with this. Why didn't you get rid of the gun?
Because I knew I hadn't killed my husband, and I knew that that gun was a link to who did.
But that gun has never been successfully linked to anyone except Susan Grund. In March 1994, she was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 60 years.
Very, very, very harsh.
Very.
60 years, right? Do you recall what you were thinking and what did you feel when you heard that?
It was a good call.
It was a good call.
It was a good call.
And why is that? That's not the answer I was thinking you were going to say to me.
Because my husband's life is worth it.
So your 60-year prison sentence is penance?
No. I think that if the right person had been convicted, I would have wanted them to get 60 years or more.
It's a strange end to a strange tale. I was open to Susan's story, but nothing she's told me makes me question that guilty verdict.
Of all the women I sat down with, Susan was the only one that didn't need additional coaxing. She wanted to. She wanted to take me on. And that is the mark of a narcissist. To the narcissist, their image is everything. Susan's greatest concern is how she looks to other people.
Susan is eligible for parole in 2019. But unless she can come up with more convincing answers to questions like mine, she will always be the woman who murdered Jim Grund.